You think the Pomodoro timer is broken, but actually, you're the problem, and I can prove it. If you've ever sat down for a 25-minute work session, stared at that timer counting down, and felt absolutely nothing happening in your brain, you're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. You're actually experiencing something a lot more interesting than that. Most productivity advice treats your brain like a machine that just needs to be switched on and pointed at a task. Set the timer. Work for 25 minutes. Take a 5-minute break. Repeat. But here's what nobody talks about. Your brain is not a machine. It's a biological system that actively resists artificial time boundaries. And the Pomodoro timer might actually be working against how your brain is designed to function. I've used the Pomodoro technique for years. It works great for about a week. Then something weird happens. You hit week 2, and suddenly you're watching the timer more than you're watching your work. You start resenting the sound it makes. And here's the thing nobody realizes. That resentment is neuroscience. It's not a character flaw. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus and decision-making, has something called attentional capacity. Think of it like a spotlight. You can only illuminate so much at once. Now, when you impose an external time limit like the Pomodoro timer, you're not just creating a work period. You're creating what researchers call time pressure. And time pressure does something counterintuitive. It actually splits your attention. Part of your spotlight is on the task. Part of it is on the timer. Part of it is now monitoring whether you're doing Pomodoro correctly. This mental overhead alone reduces your effective focus by about 15 to 20%. But wait, there's more to this. Your brain has something else working against the Pomodoro system, and it's called task initiation lag. When you start a 25-minute timer, your brain doesn't instantly shift into hyper-focus mode. There's an actual biological ramp-up period. Studies show your prefrontal cortex takes about 6 to 10 minutes to fully engage with a complex task. You know what that means? If you're doing a Pomodoro session, you've lost almost half your timer just to brain warm-up. You're finally hitting your stride around minute 15, getting real momentum, when suddenly that alarm goes off and you have to stop. It gets worse. The 5-minute break isn't actually a break for your brain the way you think it is. When you take a Pomodoro break, you're making a context switch. You're telling your brain, stop working on this, now do something else. And here's the neuroscience part that most productivity people get completely wrong. Every single context switch costs what neuroscientists call switching cost. When you shift from one task to another and back again, your brain has to reboot your working memory. You lose the cognitive momentum you built up. It's like stopping a car, getting out, waiting 5 minutes, and then starting the engine again. You're burning fuel just to get back to speed. Now, let's talk about why this matters psychologically, because there's something even deeper happening here. The Pomodoro timer appeals to a very specific kind of person, and it sets them up perfectly to fail. It appeals to people who feel out of control, people who think they need external structure because they don't trust their own instincts. And here's the contradiction. The moment you put your faith in the timer, you're actually surrendering your agency. You're saying to your brain, I don't trust you to manage this. I need an external authority to tell me when to work and when to rest. This creates a psychological dynamic that's fascinating and frustrating. You follow the timer perfectly, and part of you feels productive. You did 25 minutes. You took your break. You followed the system. But another part of you knows that your actual work output didn't match the effort. You didn't finish what you started. Your flow was interrupted. And that gap between the feeling of following a system and the reality of low output creates something called the productivity paradox. You feel productive while being less productive. There's also something almost defiant that happens in your brain when you're watching a timer. It's called reactance. When you feel like your freedom is being restricted, even by something you chose like a Pomodoro timer, you subconsciously resist it. Your brain literally fights against the artificial constraint. You know that moment where you're 3 minutes away from the break and suddenly you can't focus? That's not you getting tired. That's your nervous system pushing back against perceived control. So, what actually works instead? Here's where this gets practical. First, forget time blocks. Start using energy blocks instead. Instead of asking, how long should I work? Ask, when is my energy naturally highest? Most people have what scientists call a circadian attention peak. For a lot of you, that's somewhere between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. That's when your dopamine is highest, your prefrontal cortex is most alert, and your ability to resist distraction is strongest. Instead of a 25-minute timer, identify that window and protect it. Do your hardest cognitive work during that peak. Don't break it up into artificial intervals. Let your brain go as deep as it naturally can. You'll get 90 minutes of real focus instead of 5 sessions of fractured attention. Second, use task completion as your stopping point, not time. This is radical compared to standard Pomodoro advice, but it's how your brain actually works. Define the smallest possible version of your task that feels complete. Not a 25-minute chunk, an actual complete thing. Maybe it's finishing one section of a report. Maybe it's outlining a full email. Maybe it's solving one problem. When you hit that completion point, stop. Take your break. Your brain gets the dopamine hit of finishing something, which is infinitely more motivating than I hit the timer. Third, if you absolutely need a timer, use the opposite approach. Instead of time pressure, use time expansion. Tell yourself you have 90 minutes, not 25. You're not trying to cram a task into an artificial window. You're giving your brain permission to settle into deep work. Most of the time, you'll finish in 45 minutes. But you've removed the anxiety of rushing. You've removed the context switching penalty. And you've aligned the timer with actual attention science instead of against it. Here's my question for you. Have you ever noticed that your best work days are the ones where you didn't follow a rigid schedule, where you just got absorbed in something and came up for air 3 hours later, wondering where the time went? That's not an accident. That's your brain working the way evolution designed it. The Pomodoro timer isn't broken. Your brain isn't broken. The system is just misaligned with how you're actually wired. What productivity system are you using right now? And has this explained why it might not be working? Drop that in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into the psychology of what actually motivates your brain, hit that subscribe button